Hey, everybody. Happy Easter. What a wonderful time to be together and to celebrate this Sunday and Friday. So, Friday is going to be at 10 a.m. at Kelowna Christian Reformed Church. We're going to worship with our brothers and sisters over there. And then they're going to come worship with us on Easter Sunday. Both are at 10 a.m. And yeah, I look forward to it. It's always my favorite time to preach, and it's such a wonderful thing. He is risen. So this year I am going to preach on John 20, 11 to 18. Just some reminders as we get into this text, because we haven't done a gospel in a while. Gospel comes from the world of the genre called Greek bios. So it's a style of biography that was very common in antiquity, which is quite different than the way we do biographies. For example, in a Greek bios, you don't have stories about the person's childhood, and no surprise in the Gospels that that's not important. Of course, in our current biographies, childhood is very much emphasized because we're very much of a different kind of worldview about the development of somebody into who they are. And the way they were thinking is it's more about their great acts, their mighty acts. So even a Greek bios about a Caesar would be written in a sense of didn't talk about his childhood or his development, or at least very little. It was very much interested in who he was and who he represented. Number two, they write with a certain angle. So a Greek bios will take a component of, say, history or mythology or whatever it is, theology, and they'll write the story, the true story, but emphasizing the elements that emphasize this story of the past. So for example, again, a Caesar in a Greek bios, he may have it written where he is a Mars figure, and any mythology around that. They'll take his true actions, but they'll make sure they emphasize it in light of that, and he becomes a Mars figure, say. In our case, the Gospels definitely follow in line with that. They choose this true story, but they massage it in a way which was what you would expect in those biographies, in ways that talked about God and the way Jesus represents himself in light of the expectations. So Matthew is the Exodus. The Mark is the he uses for his template when he's telling his story the new Exodus in the promised in the prophets. Luke is King David, the King David figure. Of course, Jesus is more than that in all of them, but that's the angle they look at. And in John's Gospel, of course, in the beginning it starts, it's all based around the God of creation. So this is the angle that we're taught to, the hermeneutic it's called, how to interpret this text. So right now we are in the midst of this, and you guys have probably heard this many, many times. What I hope to be able to show is how, what is Luke, or sorry, I got them all mixed up. How is John emphasizing this story? How does he bring in some of these elements? And I think what's going on in our text today is there has been the crucifixion. We have had the resurrection. The two disciples, Peter and John, if you believe that John is the beloved disciple, which I do, they have now come to believe because they've seen the tomb empty. But now we end up with this story about Mary. Mary of Magdalene, just a little reminder about her historically, at least what we know from Scripture. She was demonized, and said she was demonized with 7 demons. Well, by now you probably understand the number 7 means complete or fully. She was completely demonized. Jesus comes and relieves her of that, and she becomes a faithful disciple, a very odd disciple to have. And she's left in this story. Now, here's the thing where people get perplexed when they try and read it as if it's a modern biography. In this biography, Mary's left alone at the tomb. In the other biographies, it's the women that come together, 3 at the tomb. And is this 2 visitations? I think what we must emphasize is what the writer is trying to say. Mary Magdalene is at the tomb, but he's also trying to tell us something through this story. And he has Mary by herself in this particular narrative because she's going to end up, as we're going to see, representing, and it's a creation narrative, right? A form of Eve, a daughter of Eve. So something to do with this has to do with that, all right? So let's get into it. So Mary, this time, stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb. Apparently, the entranceways were quite low, and you had to look down and underneath, and then you would come up into this area once you got inside. Some were so small you had to crawl into the tomb. And that must have been interesting trying to get a body in there. But there's lots of different tombs in antiquity. All right. And she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one on the head, one at the head, and one at the feet. White is always the glory of God. It's always emphasized that when it's around angels. So they are in the presence of God. They're angelic beings. They come from the heavenly realm, that other dimension. And it says, what the question that people ask is, why does he emphasize that one was sitting at the head and one was at the feet? This has been heavily debated. Augustine famously said that the head and the feet emphasize the gospel. It starts from the past and goes right through to the end, and that's what this represents. I don't agree with him, but that's one perspective. There's a reason why he puts it in there, and I'm going to argue that I think what he's doing is he's pointing to the Ark of the Covenant. I think what he's doing here is he's pointing to the reality of what they call the mercy seat, and in that particular case, you had the cherubim. I think it's Exodus 25 if you want to read about it. And you have the two angels that are put, and the ark, the ark's sitting there, and it's got the seat, the mercy seat, and then the two angels are looking over, one on each side of this mercy seat. That's where the chief priest would do the take the sacrificial blood and place it on. How can we not help but see this? Jesus is clearly the sacrificial lamb in the Gospels. He is the ultimate sacrificial lamb for the sins of the nation. This is his place where his bloodied body was placed, and then you've got two angels sitting there, and so this is the mercy seat. I think what they're trying to point to is that this is the place of mercy. This is what the ark was a type of was being fulfilled in this kind of perspective. So that's my perspective on it. Again, there's some disputation. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense of the text. So, all right. So, by the way, what that means for us is, when we come to that tomb and we come to the place where he was laid, we're coming to the place of mercy. And that's the wonderful truth about it. Then they said to her, and here's the interesting word, they use the word gune, woman. They don't say Mary, as you know, and it will be said again. And gune, if you take the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Old Testament, this is the name of Eve, woman. I think what John's wanting to point to is she is the follower of Eve. She's an Eve sort of person that's being represented, and of course we know the creation narrative. In this case, the relationship had been sullied because of Eve. I think what we're seeing here is the beginning of the undoing of the curse, and what's beautiful here is that here they're talking to her as if she is Eve. So in a way, Mary becomes that representative. She's completely demonized because of the fall of man. Now she's going to be completely restored because of the sacrifice of the Son of Man. So he goes, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Now this is the question mark. Why they're going to ask this twice, and I've said to you again and again, if they say something twice, that's like an exclamation mark. So this is the main question we're asking. I think what's going on here is they're trying to this is the beginning of having the disciples change their perspective, not only in their perspective of what Jesus' death represented, which wasn't failure, but actually the ultimate success, but ultimately who is this God and what is his purpose. I think what you're going to see, and I think the reason they write this is because, remember, John's gospel is written to us, for us, to them, but it is written for us and all disciples. And the question is, how are we going to change our perspective on who Jesus is? And I think this is the beginning of that. Mary is going to have to begin to change her perspective on who Jesus is. And this is a section where it seems like she immediately does. So, woman, why are you weeping? She said to them, they have taken away my Lord. That word Lord here, it does not mean the divine Lord. He means more her... So she wouldn't have had a view of him as divine at this moment, but more, this is a regular word to talk about somebody in authority over you. And I do not know where they have laid him. So she is confused, and she's sitting there talking to these very human-looking like people who are glowing in white. Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. That seems to be a regular resurrection motif. They don't notice Jesus on the shore. Again and again, there's something in the resurrection narrative, but she does not know that it was Jesus. Think of the two on Emmaus Road. They don't know who he is either. There seems to be this blindness still to who he really is, and I think that's what they're saying. She turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. in the sense of something has been transformed here and is going to continuously be transformed in this person of Jesus Christ. Jesus said to her, "Woman, Gune, why are you weeping?" There it is a second time. So there's that question. What is it? You're looking at the world weird. Why are you looking at the world weird? It's kind of like when Peter walks on the water and he sinks, and Jesus says, basically, what is wrong with your faith? Like, what's going on here? You got something mixed up, and that's a judgment narrative too, by the way. And whom are you seeking? So this is the question where she has to transform from this dead rabbinic figure. That's who she would have thought of followed, who was, it looked like, lost to the Romans and was just another failed prophet or failed person in Judaism. And he's asking her to change her perspective. Now, I think what she sees him as very human. So I think she sees him in the Adamic role. And of course, Jesus is more than that, and especially post-resurrection. So how would you write that in? Well, what does she say here? Supposing him to be the gardener. Well, we go back to the creation story. We know the creation story through John. I can't get into it. It's just being used again and again. What is Adam's call? He was called to tend the earth. That was a very priestly role. I think when she sees him and supposes him to be the gardener, she supposes him to be just a human. I think there's something going on there. A son of Adam, but he has transcended that, hasn't he? And so this is why the problem is she can only see through the lens of the fall. And that's the only way you can explain it, because I don't know if you know much about ancient Israel tombs. They weren't in gardens. So the fact that she was thinking he was a gardener, something else is going on. The writer is trying to get us to understand something else is at work here. She said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've laid him, and I will take him away." Still looking at the world through the eyes of failure, through the old Adam, through death reigning, all of these things. She needs to have that epiphany. She needs to have the blinders lifted and to see Jesus for who he really is. All right. Jesus said to her, "Mary," and now he calls her by name. She goes by woman, which was the child of Eve, but now he's got her by name. And when it says that when he calls her voice, those who are from him will hear and listen. This is a John text. This is the thing. He's now called her by person. She's given her personage. She's not just a part of the fall of man, and she's not just an Eve daughter now, but she's been named as a child of God. It's a beautiful, powerful moment that he calls her Mary. She turned and said to him in Aramaic, Rabboni, a rabbi, which means teacher. Notice how he says which means teacher in John. Very interesting, because this is a missional document, and this is being written to Gentiles. And so the fact he had to put in which means teacher, and when he do those things, it means that a lot of these people that are hearing this gospel are not people who grew up in Second Temple Judaism, which nobody would need an explanation for that. The main point here is she calls him Rabboni, and that's what she needs to have set free. She needs to let that go and let him go on. And that's what I think is going on here. Jesus said to her, "Do not continuously," this idea of continuously cling to me in this sense. I think what's going on here is she needs to have a transformation. She needs to let that go. She needs to be set free. And how that's going to happen is through his ascension, where the Son of Man, you read Daniel 7, that's the whole ascension narrative. He goes to the Ancient of Days. And in this case, he has got the Godhead. He is the King. He is God himself. So do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. She needs to let him go from the earthly ministry. For now, he's going to move on. He's going to do that. But now she has a job. And I think this is also the job of the church, to see Jesus in a different light and speak of him in a different light. There are people who like Jesus as a good teacher, or might even say, oh, he was a good human being. But here's the truth. For Christians, that's not enough. We have found out that this is Yahweh. This is the Lord in person. And that's what we share, that this God has overcome, because he is that. But so she's sent out, and what's a beautiful picture. Now, I want to say just quickly, this is incredibly powerful. You don't send women out with a witness. So let me say, this is radical. This isn't also a theology of women in ministry. This is simply an incredible moment where Mary, the true one, becomes like this Syrophoenician woman. She goes out and she becomes a witness to this resurrection. And it certainly points to the idea that now women are just as important in the gospel being shared into the world. And anyone who says otherwise is often they're just misogynists. Because this is radical for them, and we got to take this serious. Again, let's not make a theology of something that is not. There's much better ways to talk about women in ministry if that's your interest. But what this is saying is that there's a radical change, that Mary has also been changed from a passive agent, of Eve-like figure sitting there living in this world, to an active agent of good news. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father, and to your Father, to my God, and to your God. This is the transformation of who he's become. He's no longer just a rabbi doing good things and giving good teachings. He's also now fulfilling his role as the king of the earth. He is now putting humanity right. This whole theology of why we are saved, we must understand we are saved because in him humanity has been set right. In him humanity has transcended this world to the heavenly realm. In him, we find ourselves as we have what Paul talks in Ephesians, the inheritance in heaven. That's what this is all about. Our inheritance is in heaven because the crucified Christ is ruling and reigning. He has taken humanity and set them right in front of God because he is God, because of this sacrifice. It's one of the greatest things. And because of that, the relationship has changed. And he's also fulfilled Israel, who saw God as Father. They were his sons. He is now going, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father. Now everybody is now welcomed into true Israel, the true people of God, because they are in Jesus Christ. No more bloodline. John talks about that in chapter 1. There's no more of that stuff. It's all about faith in this God. And he has now set this right. He has put the true God in place. And this is an amazingly powerful truth of the gospel. And Mary gets to go out and share it, that because of this action of Jesus, now they're set to rights. It's just a great position. So Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, and I think the way she says it is incredible. I have seen the Lord, not my Lord, the Lord. This is Kyrios, this is Yahweh. I believe now she is seeing that whatever you're getting, she goes from seeing as a rabbinic figure, she has this transformation. She hears his voice by name, and now has this new perspective. And that's the whole point. She has to change why she's weeping, the way she looks at the world. So do we. And she eventually has this transformation where she now sees things right. She's been called by God. She has seen God, and that he had said these things to her. She becomes one of the first witnesses of the resurrection. All right, questions. The question, why are you weeping, is being asked twice in this pericope. Pericope, although it's not a fancy word, just means small section. The Bible has sections, just like we might call chapters, and pericopes are small sections that are tightly wound together, that build up on each other. And so a pericope is a small section where there's a beginning and an end. This is a pericope, the Mary story, because then right after this we can get into Thomas. Right before this we have the disciples at the tomb. So that's all that means. So why are you weeping is being asked twice in this pericope. Why are the angels and Jesus asking Mary this question? How does this set up the challenge to see the world differently for the disciples and ultimately for us? All right. Mary goes from thinking Jesus is the gardener, Adam type, to rabbi, to finally telling the disciples she saw the Kyrios Lord, which in the Old Testament is Yahweh. What is John telling us in this narrative? And how is this important for disciples' understanding of Jesus? Why might Jesus ask Mary not to cling to him because of his ascension? What is the significance of Jesus saying he is ascending to his Father and our Father? All right, well, that should give you plenty to talk about. Happy Easter. He is risen, and have a great day.